Hello, I'm Madinser and this is my basic Holy Priest guide for patch 6.2. I'm sad to say that if you want to play Holy, you may not get the chance to do so if you already have a Disco Priest in your group. Of course, it depends a lot on your raid leader and the kind of content you're doing, but generally Disco is better than Holy for their shields alone. However, don't lose hope, this guide is exactly for people that want to play Holy but are discouraged when they see how quote-unquote weak it is. To be honest, it's at the bottom of the healer strength scale, but still viable, and if played correctly, can shine in a lot of AoE fights. So, same as before, I'll go through the most important spells and how to combine them in order to play the Holy Priest to its highest potential, but still on a basic level. Enough though for at least getting into Mythic. At least. So let's start with the single target healing abilities. First of all, we have Heal, which is a spell that almost every other healer has. I think only monks don't have it. And it heals for an average amount and has a cast time of 2.5 seconds and a low mana cost. Then we have Binding Heal. It heals you and your target for the same amount. It is a really useful spell, and in the past it was underused by a lot. So I don't know if Blizz knew that it was underused or not, but they changed it to interact with Serendipity. And Serendipity is a passive that increases the cast time and reduces the mana cost of Heal or Prayer of Healing for 20%, and it stacks 2 times. It is gained by using Flash Heal or Binding Heal. The preferred one is Binding Heal, since it has half the mana cost of the other. And speaking of Flash Heal, it is a really fast but inefficient spell and should be only cast in dire situations when one or a few allies are on really low HP. Then you can combine it with Serendipity, Heal and Prayer of Healing. Moving on to Renew. It is a really strong heal over time effect, and it's the cheapest spell we have. So use it as often as you can on the tanks and injured raid members. Now on to AoE heals. Prayer of Mending is a spell that when cast on a target heals them when they take damage. Same as Earth Shield from Shamans. But Prayer of Mending has 5 stacks, and when it heals the target, the rest of the stacks go to an injured party or raid member. So in essence it is an AoE heal, just not so reliable. It should be used on cooldown, however. And the best targets in a raid fight are the tanks, since they are guaranteed to take damage, or players that are really low on HP and need that heal, or players that have a dot on them that will proc the heal. Then we have the before mentioned Prayer of Healing, and sadly it is really weak at the moment. The only time to use it is when a group in the raid needs healing and all your other spells are off cooldown. Just keep in mind that the spell soaks mana like crazy, and if you spam it you can go really quickly. Serendipity comes into play here again. The 40% mana reduction and 40% cast time increase is really good for this spell, so keep that in mind. Circle of Healing. Our strongest heal and the spell that our entire gameplay is focused on. The mana cost is 7k, so it is above average and it instantly heals 6 allies around your target. Cascade, which is the default pick in the level 90 talent tree, it has a short cast time and heals the target for a small amount. Then it splits into 2 heals that bounce to raid members and heal them while splitting into 2 again. And it does this 4 times. It is a really beautiful spell, and again sadly not so useful as it was in Mists, but still an average AoE heal, though not so reliable if not used correctly, since it has a long travel time, and more on that later. Divine Hymn, our tranquility. It functions the same as Trank, but with far less power and only one benefit. It increases healing done to all targets that it heals by 10%. The only downside is the long cast time, so you have to pick the right time and place to stand while channeling in order not to have to cancel the channel or die while doing so. And the last is Light Well. When placed on the ground, it passively heals everyone in its range that is below 50% HP. So just don't forget to place it every single fight. And it can be placed at least 2 times in a fight, since the cooldown is only 3 minutes or until it has healed 15 times. And that is every spell that affects our gameplay, or our healing gameplay anyway, though before we look at how they interact with each other, I have to explain the concept of the 3 different chakras. It is the integral part of the Holy Priest gameplay, or it should be anyway. There are 3 chakras, one for AoE healing, Chakra Sanctuary, one for single target healing, Chakra Serenity, and one for DPS, Chakra Chastise. In the past, the chakras had more nuance to them and were used in different situations. Now, the only viable one, for raiding at least, is Chakra Sanctuary. So let's start with that one. It is meant only for AoE healing, but the strength of our circle of healing makes it incredibly powerful, and in almost all situations is better than Chakra Serenity. And this is why. It reduces the cooldown of Circle of Healing by 1 second whenever you heal with any healing ability. So in other words, most of the time you have a really powerful AoE heal with a cooldown of only 5 to 8 seconds. And you also gain one other spell called Holy Word Sanctuary. It is an AoE heal that can be placed on the ground, same as Druid's Efflorescence and Shaman's Healing Rain. The only downside is that the spell is really weak, and you never use it to actively heal the raid up. However, it won't hurt to cast it, especially since you still benefit from it reducing the cooldown of Circle of Healing. So the gameplay is simpler than in MOP, because you are sitting in one chakra for a long time, if not forever, so it limits your options of what you can do. That is not to say that Serenity is completely useless. When you are using the chakra, all of your single target heals renew on the target you healed, and Holy Word Sanctuary becomes Serenity, which is the strongest single target heal you have, and it's an instant cast with a low mana cost. So there is a minority of priests that stay in this chakra forever and are just as viable, though in order to do that you have to have a lot of gear and a lot of practice in the raid encounters. Plus, not to mention, it can get really boring to maintain renew on a lot of targets. And on top of that, it requires fast reflexes in order to be the first who can top people off. And it's more viable in smaller raiding groups. Then there is another group of priests that switch between these 2 chakras in a lot of fights. I personally like to play that way, though I don't do it often. Again, you have to know the fights really well in order to make the right decisions when to switch and when not to. The main reason for switching is that not all fights have constant AoE damage where Sanctuary shines. So you have to adjust and see if there is a 10-second window of opportunity or more when you can switch to Serenity and heal with Holy Word Serenity. And finally, let's discuss our mastery and how it affects our gameplay. It is a passive that heals a target that already received a heal from you, from any spell, for a percentage of that heal. So it is a raid-wide heal over time effect if you use AoE, and you clearly should. In some cases, AoE is useful casting just for the mastery hot. Anyway, let's switch to a raiding environment and see how the class actually works. At the start of the fight, always put down your light well. Over time it does a lot of healing, and the best way to keep track of it without an add-on is by putting it on a keybind that you can see and hit easily, even though it has a 3-minute cooldown. Also, being in Chakra Serenity at the start of the fight can be beneficial, since at that point in the fight there usually isn't much AoE damage. So Holy Word's Serenity can come in handy to heal the tanks and some random damage that comes in on the raid. As I said before, the entire Holy Priest gameplay revolves around the Circle of Healing and reducing its cooldown as much as possible while maintaining a reasonable amount of mana. So as soon as you use your first circle, switch to Sanctuary and be in it for the entire fight. You should use Circle on cooldown if there are injured allies, and even if there are less than 6, because your mastery is really powerful and sometimes worth casting spells just for it, and more importantly its interaction with the talent called Twists of Fate. It basically increases the healing and the DPS you do when you heal a target that is below 35% of maximum HP. And that's why doing AoE healing and spreading your mastery is so crucial. Prayer of Mending should also be used on cooldown, and preferably targeting the tanks. Use Renew on injured party members, and the most healing you can get from Renew with minimal raid-wide damage is just by keeping it to the tanks, and while there isn't much damage coming in, you have the time to cast Heal or other cheap spells that have a long cast time. If however there is a lot of damage coming in and your AoE abilities are on cooldown, a viable way to heal is also to cast Binding Heal 2 times in order to get 2 stacks of Serendipity, and then depending on if there is a group of players injured, use Prayer of Healing, or just a few injured people not in a group, just use Heal. Another important thing to keep in mind is when to use Cascade. In the past, it was a really important part of the Holy and Discipline gameplay. Now it is generally used to spread your mastery, however, if you actually do use it at the right time, you could get a small benefit from it. So the best time to use it is just a few seconds before a major AoE ability, and that's because of the spell's large travel time. That way you will heal the entire raid milliseconds after the damage comes in, and nobody will notice a thing. So you maximize the healing of the spell and don't overheal by much. As a last resort, use Divine Hymn. If you see it, the raid will die, if you don't have explicit orders from your raid leader. The main thing to keep in mind with this spell is that the 10% increase in healing affects everyone, not just you, and if another healer uses a weak AoE heal, it will be more powerful. So it would be wise to coordinate with the other healers to use their AoE when you use your hymn. There is one more spell I forgot to mention, and it can save anyone's life at any point in the encounter: Guardian Spirit. In some ways it resembles a paladin's Lay on Hands, but it does require the target to get healed with other spells during the buff's duration. And what it does is it increases the healing done to the target by 60%, and if the target receives damage that would otherwise kill him, he is healed to 40% of his maximum HP. So while this buff is active, the tank can heal himself to full HP with only their healing, if they have it of course, let alone by receiving some exterior heals. So in some way it is even better than Lay on Hands, since the target can't die, and especially because it is only a 3-minute cooldown spell and can be cast 2 times in a fight. So that is the basic gameplay. Use Circle to heal, and every other spell to reduce the cooldown of Circle and heal in the meantime. And if you are having mana problems, Use the Mindbender talent and remember to activate it every 1 minute on cooldown. Finally, I would like to go through the rest of the spells at our disposal. Fade. With the Glyph of Fade, it is used as a small damage reduction cooldown as well as a threat reduction spell. Must dispel a really powerful ability and a speciality of the priests in general. It removes all magical effects from a targeted AoE area on the ground. It comes in handy in so many situations and in almost every raid ever. Angelic Feather, a strong sprint ability with 3 stacks and really low cooldown. Though it can be tricky to use in raids, especially if you want to boost other targets, since it is only a small little feather that you can place on the ground below targets you want to boost. Or better yet, you have to predict their movement and place the feather in front of them. However, if you don't feel comfortable with it, Body and Soul is better for beginners to get a hang of. Mind Seer is our AoE DPS ability, and you really shouldn't be concerned with it because it does really low DPS even in Chakra Chastise. Then there is our Dispel ability, same as every other healers, though we do have a Purge as well. And it does come in handy often, since there are only a few classes that actually have it. Only Shamans, Mages, Priests and Hunters, not counting Druids because they can only remove specific buffs. And as you can see, I macroed those two, and I will explain it and every other macro I use in the second part of the guide. Fear Ward is exactly what it says. It wards you from fear effects, and outside of PvP it has almost no use. I keep it on keybind I can easily hit, and I do use it on cooldown even in raid fights, even though it costs mana. It's just a habit I have, and in some cases it has proven useful. Although not much, since I can just remove fear with Will of the Forsaken. Shackle Undead is basically a hard CC like a Polymorph or a Freezing Trap, but only usable on undead targets. Really useful against DKs and their pets, but not so much in PvE, though you never know. Leap of Faith, one of the best and most fun spells in the game. It has been the demise of many raiders, but now with the perk you get in Draenor, it does increase one heal you do on the target after you pull him. Mostly negligible though, especially since there are items now that people use to prevent you from pulling them to their death. Then there are our 2 DPS abilities, and they are really weak compared to the other healers. And plus, if you really want to DPS a bit, you have to switch to Chakra Chastise, and that is never a good idea in a raid. Plus, if you want to do maximum DPS, you have to stand in fire in order to get a DPS increase and heal someone that is below 35% to get yet another DPS increase. So in theory, yeah, we could do a lot of DPS, but a lot of things have to happen in order for us to do that, and it's really rare in a raiding environment. Lastly, our buff that gives stamina, levitate and resurrection. No explanation needed there. So those are the basics of the Holy Priest gameplay. I hope that it helped at least someone out, and if you want to learn more, check out the next part where I will go over the talents in depth, as well as the macros, glyphs, add-ons, gearing and stuff like that. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.